Welcome to the Beth Yeshua podcast. For more episodes like this, visit bethyeshua.org/media. Hi, everyone. Before we get started on this podcast, just wanted to let you know that we had some technological issues. And so we are going to do the best that we can and salvage what we can. And then we are going to try to get Rabbi Gliebe back as soon as we possibly can to actually really have a more full conversation. We're having connectivity issues, Yay, the joys of technology. Anyways, please enjoy this podcast. It was actually a wonderful conversation with Rabbi Gliebe. We'll have him back soon. And we're going to be discussing intermarriage. We're going to be discussing Jewish identity and kind of the ways in which Messianic Judaism needs to do better. As always, if you're interested in seeing us and not just listening, you can go to our YouTube or to Spotify, or you can find any of our resources at bethyeshua.org. Thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Beth Yeshua podcast. My name is Shari Rubinstein. I'm here with my co-host, Shari Rubinstein. Hi, Mom.
Hey, Josh.
And today we have a special guest. We have Rabbi Gliebe, and he's here from Chicago via the internet. Hi, Rabbi Gliebe.
Shalom to you. It's good to be with you guys.
Thank you for coming. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast, you know that we've been wanting to have Rabbi Gliebe, both senior Gliebe and also hopefully the younger version also at some point, because we really love them. We love their minds, and we love the fact that they've been in Messianic Judaism all their lives, it feels like, and they have like a real experience and a real kesher with the movement and what's happening right now. And so our desire was to have Rabbi Gliebe on and talk about some of those same issues of identity and intermarriage and some of the things that we've already discussed, and to hear a perspective outside of our own community, because Messianic Judaism can be kind of insular, and you can kind of get this sort of like echo chamber and feel like what you do in your Messianic congregation is what everybody else is doing. But our communities are so different. For example, Rabbi Gliebe is in Chicago. They're surrounded by actual Jewish community. We don't really have that here in Sacramento. We have a very dispersed Jewish community kind of like all over our area. Anyways, I'm really grateful, Rabbi, for you being with us today.
I'm glad to be here too.
I would love for you, if you could, just kind of give us a little nutshell of how you ended up as a rabbi, maybe a little bit about your community before we jump into our questions.
Okay. Well, I did not grow up religious, observant at all. I grew up in Northern California. I always say my father grew up in San Francisco, not religious at all. My mother came from a fairly messed up background, but her mother was Jewish. My mother growing up, I know that she would attend a conservative synagogue on occasion down the street from my house. I was aware of it. I had Jewish friends. Basically, none of my friends were observant or religious. Only one went to the synagogue my mother attended. At about the age of 15 and a half, through the witness of some Christian friends, I became a believer and ended up going to a place called Moody Bible Institute to study how to be an evangelist. And there met other Jewish people that believed in Jesus and Yeshua and lived Jewish life. And eventually worked with a group called Jews for Jesus and Chosen People, but became attracted to the congregational movement of Messianic Judaism, because what do you do with people when they become believers in Yeshua?
Right.
And so serving in different ways, learning in different environments, a couple of different congregations in the Chicago area. One of the things I also then came to see is that there was an awful lot of identity confusion among the younger people.
Sure.
So in the congregations I attended locally, on one side it was a congregation where there were a lot of Jewish people, but they had no commitment to their Jewish identity. And so you had kids with two Jewish parents who really didn't live any kind of Jewish life and had no commitment to marrying other Jewish people or doing anything Jewish. And on the other side was a congregation where probably, over half of the people in the congregation weren't Jewish at all. And the Jewish kids in the congregation didn't know who was Jewish. I remember one young man, because I started at a pretty early on just working with the youth because nobody else was. Yep. And I remember one guy with two Jewish parents told me, listen, I know what Jewish is with you and me and at school, because going to public school in Skokie at the time, like 30 or 40% of the kids were Jewish at school. But at the congregation, that Guatemalan kid thinks he's Jewish. So I don't
Right.
know who Jewish is at the synagogue.
Right.
And
Yes.
all of that got me to think a couple of things. First of all, it reinforced to me the importance of community. You've got to have a solid community with clear values. And if it's going to be a Messianic Jewish community, those values need to be consistent with the greater Jewish community. And so a concept of what I call radical Yeshua faith, radical commitment to my faith in Yeshua and to the God of Israel, but also a radical commitment to Jewish identity and what it means to be Jewish and Jewish values, normative Jewish values.
Right.
And so Devar Emet started, frankly, out of a youth group effort. We started a children's club and then a youth group, and Jewish kids made professions of faith, and then some parents started to come, and the synagogue developed pretty much organically out of that. And so today we're a community of maybe 24 families. Maybe on a given Shabbat, there might be 35, 40 adults with about 12 to 14 kids. But pretty much everyone who comes is Jewish or married to a Jew. And in that way, it's reflective of the Jewish community. That's the reality of it.
It sure is.
So we're very pleased to see the children of individuals who came to faith through the ministry work who are actually here. So you have the parents. Some of the parents are still here who came to faith and started coming. Their children are here, married to other Jewish believers, and now their grandchildren are in attendance.
Oh, wonderful.
And so that's we're very encouraged by that.
I think that commitment to reaching the younger generation is something that serves you really well, because you're able to help those kids be solid in their Jewish identity and to love Yeshua radically. And then also, can you seek out a Jewish partner and raise Jewish kids also, right? And I know that that's been a big focus of yours for a long time. Did the congregation, it was founded by you then at some point? Like
Correct.
At some point you're just like, this is large enough, let's just be a congregation?
Like 2005. We made the decision to become officially a congregation in 2005.
And was it mostly youth still at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
we, I would say 2005, yes. I mean, it was overwhelmingly, at this point, high schoolers and college students. We had a few older people who were parents, but it was mostly college students and high schoolers and junior hires. Yeah.
So what's the
The
current
giving was really
demographics?
problematic.
I bet, yes. Like people don't have jobs.
Yes, right.
Yeah. But like right now then, is it more of a mix now? Because you've got like some
it's
of those
more
older
normal.
families.
I mean, we might have we have a few people in their 20s, a couple of college students. When one of the young people came to faith who was a high schooler, now he's in college, and another girl is in college. We have like 3-4 college students, 4 or 5 in their 20s who come, and then a group that's a large group of maybe 15 or so who are in their 30s now, and then we have a few. Really, we have very few in their 40s, most or 50s, and so I would say still the vast majority of the congregation, probably 60% of the congregation, is under the age of 40. And older than maybe even 70% of the congregation.
Wow.
So
that's awesome. And then I wanted to also highlight, because I know of these and our listeners may not, but you also do a couple things I think are really wonderful and also unique within Messianic Judaism. You have a very strong and vibrant camp that you're doing in summer. You also have like Club Maccabee, I think, that you're doing with the younger kids. And you also do really like a Taglit sort of birthright thing, but for Messianic Jewish kids who often are denied from being able to go and be on Taglit because of their faith. Can you just give me like a little nutshell on each one of those and where they're at right now?
It's under what we call Hederic Youth. So Hederic Youth is
the way.
Yeah, it means the way, right?
Yeah.
It comes from the book of John. And the idea is we want Jewish kids, to have an understanding of the way God would want them to live, both as Jews and as followers of Messiah. And so the programs, there's obviously local activities to do with kids where, at this point, we don't have a ton of teenagers. It's just a demographic reality where we're at. But we have a group of elementary-aged kids, and so there's things we're doing with them. But Club Maccabee is part of this, and it's a children's club we run on Wednesday nights. And, we probably have a dozen kids, Jewish kids. Some of them most of them believers, but a couple not, to trying to just educate them, encourage them, give them understanding in terms of their Jewish identity, and give them a collective kesher, this idea they can be together and develop a relationship. The Hadaric youth programs that are organized are the Winter Aliyah, which is a discipleship weekend in February. We have the Camp Hadaric, which is in the summer for a week. And then the Taglit program is the Hadaric Youth Israel Aliyah. And these are three major programs which function. There's also a Hadaric Youth study. We have a scripture study led by one of our volunteer staff every Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock Chicago time. And so, I don't know, about a half a dozen or more now Jewish kids who are a part of this Hadaric youth work, in essence. They'll Zoom in and be a part of this study. It's been going on for several years now. And it's a way for them to be spiritually encouraged and to connect with one another. And so even though they can't live in proximity because of where their families live, they can stay connected.
Let me ask a question, Rabbi. In terms of these camps and Club Maccabee, et cetera, I'm assuming Club Maccabee, I know we have that program. We have not been using it. But what's happening with your non-Jewish children? Are they all equally in this at all the camps and everything?
No. So, for instance, for years, with Club Maccabee, we had a period of time, especially years ago, when things were just different. Everybody was younger. So we would have Jewish kids bring their non-Jewish friends to club. And so they were all unbelievers, And so we took the opportunity, obviously, to minister to the kids and saw at least a couple of those kids come to faith. But not being Jewish, they also had issues with programming that didn't relate to them.
Right.
And so, one of the things that's occurred too, like recently, for Camp Hadaric, for years we would always have one, maybe two non-Jewish kids at camp. And we decided recently, it's like we've just got to tighten up the expectations, because sometimes that causes problems because there's such an emphasis on learning Jewish identity that there are camps all over the place. But there's not really any camps, even in our own movement, that really focus just on Jewish kids.
Right.
So that's our camp.
Does Or Lador do that?
I can't really speak for Or Lador, but I know
yes
that
and no,
right?
Because foundationally they also believe in conversion too.
Right.
And so that gets into a whole nother issue, which we're going to deal with at some point. Yeah.
Right. In everything we do with our youth programming, it's about avoiding confusion. There has to be clarity of understanding.
Sure.
And that's just what we've decided, because you can't, if a kid, like I had a woman who wanted to come. Her grandmother was Jewish, her grandmother on her mother's side, okay? But the problem is it was so long ago, and the mother had converted to Catholicism to marry the grandfather, and then the mother was raised Baptist or something. So, and then the mother who came to us, that's 3 generations removed, she had children, 3 daughters, by a non-Jewish guy. It's impossible to raise these kids as Jewish. No one would accept it. They'd have to go through formal conversion in any branch of Judaism, whatever. Right. And I said, listen, the best way to operate this is you can recognize you have this Jewish heritage back there, but it doesn't equate to being accepted as Jewish. Your daughters, you can't raise them to think that they're Jewish. The Jewish community will not accept them as Jewish.
And this is a hard conversation to have, right? I mean, like, how did she take that?
Well, she was upset, but you see, also part of it is they forget there is this particular woman forgot that the most important thing is relationship with God. She was seeking a Jewish identity, where if she came to me and she was a single individual who said, listen, my grandmother is buried in a Jewish cemetery. My mother was converted to Christianity, but I want to identify as Jewish. I could work with that. The Jewish community would say, oh, yeah, it's redemption, But if you're saying yet your grandmother converted and there's no cemetery and you're suddenly out of nowhere saying you want to live Jewish life and put that on your kids, it's not practical. It won't work.
Right.
But that goes
Yeah.
on all the time in the Messianic
All
Jewish
the
movement,
time.
and the
All the
result is
time.
confusion and people get hurt.
I think one of the ways I heard Stuart Dowerman refer to that is as unicorn Jews. They just kind of magically appear in their family like history.
Yeah,
And
listen.
is that actually helpful? Like, does
Yeah,
that actually
no.
transmit value from generation to generation? It
Right.
doesn't.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
No. When
So
I
then,
became a believer in Yeshua, one of the things I wanted to figure out is do I have to stay Jewish?
I think we were right in the middle of like you were going to tell us a story. I don't remember what the story was though.
It's okay. We'll just let it go because I can't remember either. We had a little bit of a disturbance here.
Yeah, no worries.
But
I guess what I wanted to talk about is I know Jewish identity is really important to you, right? So one of the conversations we just had was on intermarriage and how
Yeah.
to actually practically deal with intermarriage in ministry, even as you're counseling couples for marriage. And I was just wondering, as a rabbi, how often have you maybe even done premarital counseling with intermarried couples or couples that want or seeking for an intermarriage? Do you encourage your Jewish kids, for example, to actively seek out Jewish spouses rather than do intermarriage? How do you approach intermarriage in general?
yeah, we actively, okay. So, yes, I mean, I've married a number of people, obviously. Not me, they've married each other, but I've officiated. And I've done, obviously,
You were
I've
there.
done the premarital counseling. Now, so the first thing in an intermarriage, I can think of one couple that came to the synagogue. The Jewish guy was not a believer, grew up Reform, and his wife grew up as an evangelical Christian, but they were dating, okay? And so she
Okay.
brought him to the synagogue. And I basically, first time I sat him down, I said, you guys want to get married, but I have to tell you as a rabbi that I have to discourage you from marrying each other because, she's a young man, she's not Jewish. And,
Yeah.
but basically they said, well, but we're going to get married. So I said, okay, I mean, because this is the reality. I have a responsibility to say it's going to be hard. I mean, you're marrying somebody who's coming from a different background. Actually, intermarriage is one of the leading reasons for divorce among people is you find out you actually don't have much in common.
Right.
Usually I'll have to go through all this. And then I basically do marriage counseling with people like this. If they're committed to get married, what am I going to do? But I basically ask them to commit to raising the kids as Jewish. And then we go through, and there's a lot of it is basic premarital, like you would do with anybody, focusing on what it means to be married and to care for one another and all that stuff and the difficult realities of marriage. But then also I add what it means to have a Jewish home.
Right.
You got the practical realities of that. And to some extent, I'd say it's been pretty effective. In the past, I've also, with the people that have come within the community, they have stayed within the community, and the non-Jewish spouse has basically sought to accommodate to some extent. It all depends on how committed the Jewish spouse is to living Jewishly, too.
So you were counseling this couple. They ended up getting married. They are actually coming to your congregation at that point. And so have they had children? Are they raising them as Jews?
Well, this particular family has not had children yet. This couple, but others, yeah. I mean, they've had kids and they've raised them in the community. The key is having a sane community to raise them within. I'd say this is the same in any community.
Yes.
If you have a synagogue or a church that is dysfunctional, the children will reject it and not want to be a part of it. If the synagogue is wholesome and it provides meaning for their life, then they will accept it. They'll embrace it.
Right. Right.
And so,
how would you define that? How would you define a Messianic congregation that is able to provide that kind of an environment for intermarried families?
first, there cannot be confusion in regards
Identity
to who is
confusion.
Jewish.
Right.
Cannot be.
Yeah.
Well, identity confusion is one part of it. Can't be theological confusion. Can't be
Right.
disorder.
Right.
I mean, if you have a congregation where people do whatever they want and there's a lot of immaturity in terms of how people are acting, that's problematic in and of itself. But then if you have people, like you say, you have people that are clearly not Jewish in their background, but they're wearing a tallis and a kippah, and they're dancing with a Torah scroll, and they're claiming to be Jewish when everybody knows that they're absolutely not born Jewish. They have no connection to the Jewish people. That also adds a bunch of confusion.
Right.
So you want to eliminate as much as possible all confusion. And for an intermarried couple, that means that the non-Jewish spouse is fully accepted and included and embraced.
Right.
All
Right.
right, just they're marrying into the Jewish people, and we don't have a formal conversion process. We're not going to do that, but they need to feel loved and brought in fully and completely, and a part of the community. That
And
goes a
that can
long
be
way to
hard.
helping.
That can be a really difficult thing too, because I think often for the non-Jewish spouse, there is sometimes we associate worth with labels, right? And so like it
Yeah.
can be really hard for them to not be called Jewish and yet to be raising Jewish children. Have you seen that struggle in those intermarried couples of value with that identity?
I have, on occasion, but also most of the couples I work with are actually Jewish couples. I mean,
Right.
both. I'll give you an example of a stress recently, because it was a halakhic issue. So a woman who came to faith, her father was Jewish, mother was not. Her husband is Jewish by his mother, not father, but they got married, right?
Yeah.
And so they had a son. And then when they went to do the bris, they would not do a full. They did the bris, but they didn't complete the paperwork
Oh.
because the kid is not halakhically Jewish, and that really bothered. It made her feel guilty because her mother wasn't Jewish, therefore and the father was angry.
Wow.
And I remember, and
Yeah.
I said to her, "Listen, raise your kids as Jews. That's what matters. The truth is, they'll make a decision, if they encourage them to marry other Jewish believers, no one will doubt their Jewish identity."
Right.
Knowing your family and knowing how they live. If they live Jewish life and are committed to the Jewish people, people will basically accept them fully as being within the Jewish community. That's just the reality of it. But
Sure.
if you have confusion, then it makes it a whole lot harder. Makes
Right.
it a whole lot harder.
Now, you've seen a lot of, I know, UMJC congregations. I don't know how much of the MJAA you've also seen, but I know this is maybe a little bit on the nose, but if you were to give me like a percentage of congregations in the United States, there is like either practical confusion in worship on a given Shabbat, or there's theological confusion, or certainly identity confusion, what would you say the ratio of like clarity versus confusion is in the Messianic movement?
Wow.
You want to know? It's got to be 90% are confusing.
Right.
90%.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I can think of a number of UMJC congregations that I have visited, and the people are wonderful. But first of all, you have no idea who's Jewish.
Right.
It's clear, and when I walk around and talk to people, the number is very small. Maybe 15%, 10 or 15% are people born Jewish,
Right.
and they're usually
Right.
older people, right?
Right.
But it's also, there's confusion in how they do things that are done that are clearly not normative in terms of Jewish practice.
Right.
And so if you have a Jewish family with Jewish kids, and those kids are in any way connected with the regular Jewish community, and they see things done in the synagogue at the Messianic congregation, which they know are not the way things are normally done when they go to their parents, grandparents, their cousins or whatever, it continues to breed that confusion.
So would
So
you
yeah,
say
90%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a practical part of like just what our weekly, Shakrit service looks like, and how closely that aligns or with the values and the norms of the greater Jewish community, right? I've thought about that a lot as my kids have gone into public school and they've interacted with other Jews, and like one of the first questions is like, well, were you bar mitzvah? Like what was your aliyah to Torah, and like things like that. Those are immediately kind of the cultural touchstones. You guys have a Torah service. Like, what does your service look like?
Right.
What would you say at Devar Emet your service looks like? Like if we came in, what would be the percentage of like Hebrew to English? How much would it align with like a traditional siddur? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, our service is a conservative. I would say our service is patterned off of a classic conservative service, generally without musaf. We do 3 aliyot instead of 7. Instead of 7 Torah aliyahs, we have 3.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's a traditional Jewish service.
Yeah.
And we use an awful lot of Hebrew.
Okay.
The one kid who we married, who came with his Christian girlfriend. He grew up Reform, and he says we do more Hebrew than he grew up with at the Reform synagogue.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, that's what I tell people. We have a Chabad guy who started attending, or he attended once, but he's coming to our Brotherhood study, and he professes Yeshua faith, but he enjoys, I think, more of a traditional service. But he was picking at our service because there were certain aspects of it which just differ from Chabad, and Chabad is like aberrant to me. So it was an interesting conversation. Right. But there were small little things that we do that he wasn't familiar with in Chabad. Otherwise, he davened along with us and didn't see much difference.
Yeah. It looked like you had a question there, Mom, for a second. I was wondering if you had a question about that.
Right. I'm forming one, but I don't really have it right now.
Okay.
But I did want to say that it's interesting when he was talking about the what his demographics look like, and I was kind of comparing it to what ours look like. I did a recent evaluation of our demographics, and we have 12 couples. They may be families, but it's Gentile married to Gentile. We have 17 couples where it's a Jewish person married to a Gentile, and 90% of those, the Gentile is the man. And then we have 5 Jewish married to Jewish. And in terms of our single people and or widowers, etc., we have 7 Jewish and 8 Gentile. But I think our percentage is higher of Jewish people actually in the room at any given time. But what we're dealing with is that the men being the spiritual heads, quote unquote, of the family, and those being Gentile and the woman being Jewish, it's been difficult, for them. And the thing I was going to ask actually was, when you were talking about how much Hebrew is in your service, I wondered, how much do you translate? Do you go ahead and do it in Hebrew, and then do you do it in English as well?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we lost Rabbi Gliebe for the third and final time. So we will definitely schedule for him to be back. If you would like to watch this podcast instead of just listening to it, go to our YouTube, Beth Yeshua Sacramento or Beth Yeshua Sac, or search for us on Spotify. But until next time, and our furthering conversations on Jewish identity, see you later. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can always visit bethyeshua.org for more.